Good afternoon. I'm Dan Carroll, and today I will be covering a comparative analysis of the craft beer industry. Here is the agenda for today. And these are the four companies that we will be analyzing in this presentation. We will get into the details of each in a couple of minutes. The methodology for our analysis today, we used Google News for traditional media coverage. We looked at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn for social media analysis, and collected our public opinion data from a survey conducted on Qualtrics. Here are our objectives for today's analysis. And now we will look at some of the industry background, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the four companies. The craft brewing industry is one of the fastest growing and most popular alcoholic beverage segments in the United States, and is currently an $8 billion industry. As such, one of the biggest issues facing craft brewers is competition. As you can see, the number of breweries in the US has more than tripled in the last 10 years, and we are in danger of hitting market saturation. More breweries closed last year than in any year in history. I'm sure many of you are aware of the consolidation among some of the larger breweries in the world, such as Anheuser-Busch, Coors, and Molson, which have merged and bought up smaller brewers to help make themselves even bigger. This provides them with more money and resources to reach larger publics that smaller craft brewers just can't keep up with. Amongst themselves, craft brewers have to compete for assets and resources while facing a fight to remain competitive against the healthier alcohol options that are becoming more popular, not to mention that more and more states are now legalizing marijuana. Regulation and taxation is a big concern of the alcohol industry in general. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act reduced tax rates for smaller brewers starting in 2018, but that legislation expires in 2020. So there's a lot of discussion amongst the industry to try to get that legislation extended. Breweries are facing constantly changing laws and regulations that can cost them in taxes, fees, potential suspension or revocation of permits and licenses, and things like that. So as we mentioned earlier, the definition of what a craft brewer is, and that definition has changed over the last few years and is likely to continue to change, primarily to keep including Yuengling and the Boston Beer Company. They continue to grow out of the definition, but the smaller brewers want to continue to include them because with their size and influence, they are the most able lobbyists for the little guys. Much like the rest of the country, much has been made recently of the lack of diversity in the industry. It's been a topic of a lot of conversation because there are very few craft breweries that are solely minority owned. I think we're all aware of the issues caused by the current pandemic as far as its impact on business and revenue. One of the less obvious impacts, though, is that the industry gets many of its metal products, like the machinery used in breweries, from overseas, and the pandemic has caused supply chain issues for companies to be able to get those products. Additionally, there's a shortage of aluminum cans, which, with the pandemic cutting out on a lot of draft beer sales because restaurants are closed, breweries are trying to increase their can product, and this aluminum can shortage just caused an additional obstacle. So now let's look at our four companies. First off, the Boston Beer Company is the brewer of the Sam Adams line and is the only one of these companies to be publicly traded. It's the second largest craft brewery in the US and the 9th largest overall. To try to help them compete with the larger breweries, Boston Beer recently acquired and merged with Dogfish Head Brewery out of Delaware. In addition to the size restrictions on the definition of craft brewers, Boston Beer has also pushed for changes to accommodate other brewed products such as cider, as its Truly Seltzer and Twisted Tea brands have brought recent financial success. As we mentioned, due to its influence, Boston Beer is an active advocate for the industry, playing big brother to some of the smaller breweries. America's oldest brewery, D.G. Yuengling & Son, has been owned and operated by the same family since 1829. It's the largest craft brewery and the sixth largest overall. It operates 2 breweries in Pennsylvania and 1 in Florida. Yuengling just recently announced a distribution partnership with Molson Coors that won't affect ownership, but it will expand its availability nationwide. Yuengling has had some negative publicity this century, some of which have resulted in boycotts of its brand, which obviously caused an issue with its popularity. Interesting to note, concerning the diversity issue, there are no more male children in the Yuengling family, so it will soon be run by the 4 women of the 6th generation of the Yuengling line. So we included Duvel Mortgat USA in this analysis for its unique situation in the industry that we're discussing here. It is not an American company. Duvel was founded and operates out of Belgium and purchased Brewery Omegon out of New York in 2003. Later added Boulevard Brewing from Kansas City and Firestone Walker from California, and branded them under the Duvel Mortgat USA brand. With those 3 brewers under its umbrella, Duvel qualifies as the 5th largest craft brewery in the US and the 12th largest brewery overall. The subsidiary breweries really have no significant issues of their own. Just pulled a couple of news items here. We'll move on to Stone Brewing, which is the West Coast standard of breweries. It's currently the 9th largest craft brewery and the 18th overall largest brewery in the US. It operates breweries in California and Richmond. Significant issue for Stone Brewing is the lawsuit it filed against Molson Coors for trademark infringement when that company changed the packaging of its Keystone line to separate the word Stone on the labels. Perhaps to support that lawsuit, Stone Brewing then filed against numerous other and smaller companies that used the word Stone in their brands. And this has caused significant amount of negative publicity for the company. Stone's also garnered media coverage this year due to the large number of layoffs, although it's not all negative, because the majority of the layoffs were due to the fact that Stone operates more tap rooms than most other craft brewers, and the company couldn't support all the servers and cashiers at those locations while they were shut down due to the pandemic. But since it was a large number, they did get coverage on those layoffs. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the traditional media analysis of these companies. So Boston Beer garnered far and away the most news coverage, mostly because of its stock values, reporting on its value and whether or not to buy or sell. The Duvel Mortgat USA brand name only garnered 98 results in this query, so the number on this chart represents the total from the queries of the 3 subsidiary brand names. Now we'll look at some of the tone of the individual company's coverage. So as we mentioned before, Boston Beer coverage predominantly concerned its stock value. Note the breakout of that coverage down in the bottom right. The company had minimal negative news coverage. Most of that was brokerage firms who recommended against buying the stock based on their individual analysis, although there were many that suggested to buy, but that was the majority of its negative news coverage. Yuengling is very good at promoting itself with press releases, and it benefits from the positive media coverage due to websites and bloggers that just copy those releases word for word, including all the glowing adjectives concerning the brand and its products. The company also gets significant coverage on its charitable efforts out of those press releases. The lone negative article that was pulled in this query was just a poor review from someone who did not like the chocolate porter collaboration they did with Hershey's. So this poll only queried the Duvel Mortgat USA brand name. As you can see, it only resulted in 23 articles, almost all of which were mentions of its breweries and products among lists of the most popular breweries and the most delicious beers. Again, as we mentioned, the Stone Brewing lawsuit dominated its coverage and resulted with the most negative coverage of any of the breweries. The company's gaining a reputation as a bully to the smaller breweries that it once claimed to be a part of. Numerous references to them being the David that has now become the Goliath. Much of the positively toned articles were just favorable product reviews. So now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the company's social media presence. So this graph represents web interest or internet searches of each of the companies from a Google Trends query. The numbers represent search interest relative to the highest point on the chart for this year-long period, which, as noted on the arrow, was based on the news of Yuengling merging with Molson Coors. So all this data is relative to that highest point of web search. Sam Adams' search interest peaked when its product was featured in a Saturday Night Live parody a few months ago. The other companies really had low web interest relative to the big two companies. So this slide is a map representation of the previous graph showing what companies were the most searched in each state. The color intensity represents the percentage of searches. So for example, you can see each company dominated in its own brewery state, but this also shows the reach of the larger two companies pretty much split geographically. So next we're going to look at social media platform visibility. Here we see the number of Facebook followers. Boston Beer dominates on Facebook while the other companies are relatively even in their number of followers. You'll note on this chart and the following charts in this series that the numbers for Duvel Mortgat USA reflect the totals of the accounts for the three subsidiaries, as Duvel does not market for them on social media. So that number is not under the Duvel Mortgat Facebook page name, but is a total of Boulevard, Omagong, and Firestone Walker. So with that in mind, you can see that those three smaller brewers are very popular on Twitter and Instagram, while the older, more established big two are much less visible comparatively. And here, Stone Brewing has a significantly larger following on Instagram than anywhere else. And that's possibly because it is the most creative and visually appealing on that platform among these companies. So Boston Beer is the only company that uses LinkedIn in any significant way, while Yuengling and Stone mainly only post job openings, and the Duvel Trio do not post on the site at all. They have 0 posts, even though they do have followers. Boston Beer also features its employees in business ventures along with job announcements. So now we're going to take a look at a qualitative assessment of the company's social media optimization. The 4 areas we analyzed were presence, visibility, activity, and responsiveness. And here are the metrics that we used to compare them. You can come back and read these more closely when you have the time. So Boston Beer conducts its social media activity under the Samuel Adams brand. If you try to look at the Boston Beer Company, they don't have a significant presence, but they operate, it tells you to search under Samuel Adams. Now, we mentioned the follower numbers previously, and the company gets significant activity from those followers, and it frequently but randomly engages with them. So this company earned 4 points on our scale, which was the second highest score of the four. Yingling and Boston Beer primarily use their social media platforms for product placement. We saw that Yingling has the least amount of followers on most of the platforms, and although it posts fairly frequently, the company does not engage or respond to its followers at all. It basically posts and forgets, which helped it earn the lowest score in this analysis. Interestingly, our highest score came from the three smallest breweries who, on average, are the most active on all platforms, except for LinkedIn, as we mentioned. Ironically, they get minimal engagement from their followers, but they are the most responsive of the group and answer almost every question that is asked, which most are about the availability of the brand, but they also frequently thank customers for positive comments. They are very interactive with their followers. Stone Brewing is the most imaginative and attractive on social media, and it posts on Instagram almost twice as much as it does on Twitter. The company never responds to follower comments or questions, which seems like a missed opportunity to soften the reputation that they are earning from their lawsuits. So as we discussed, our public opinion data comes from a survey conducted on Qualtrics in November and December that received 65 respondents. So here we have the results of our awareness question. The main challenge to our poll was the regional bias. 95% of the respondents were from the East Coast, which mainly accounts for the low awareness numbers here for the Midwest and West Coast brewers. One interesting takeaway is that numerous respondents indicated they did not know that Boston Beer was the parent company for Sam Adams and that Duvel Mortgott owned its 3 breweries in the US. So you can see on this chart, more people indicated that they have tried those products than indicated that they were aware of the parent brands. The East Coast bias also affected our favorability question, as can be seen by the large number of respondents who had no opinion on Duvel or Stone Brewing. Of note, though, is the fact that of those who did have an opinion, if we take out the no opinion respondents, of those who had an opinion, Stone Brewing had the highest favorability rating of those who rated them among the 4 companies. So our question on which media outlets the respondents have seen the brands was mostly rendered useless by the East Coast bias. As you can see, Boston Beer and Yingling are seen on TV a lot, but we include the chart here to note that Stone Brewing, despite its low awareness in this survey, received at least as many notices on social media as any of the companies. So we included that slide as that interesting note. So these next slides include some of the comments from the respondents on why they do or do not choose to drink each of the products. Boston Beer received numerous positive comments on its variety and quality. Note that Yingling earned a few negative comments on its political leanings that we mentioned earlier in its background segment. And you'll see Duvel and Stone Brewing received numerous comments about unfamiliarity and lack of availability, but they also received numerous positive comments on the quality of their products. And note on Stone Brewing as well, the packaging, logos, and IPAs comment. We mentioned their Instagram, the creativity of their Instagram, and their visual attractiveness. So here are our takeaways from this analysis. So Boston Beer Company, their traditional media reach is more business and financial related than the other companies. And as we talked about, its inclusion in the craft brewer category and its involvement and lobbying efforts have earned it a big brother reputation among those craft breweries. So our recommendation here for Boston Beer is to continue to leverage its reputation as an advocate of the smaller brewers, as it is earning the company a positive reputation. And we should continue with that. They have received positive sales, as we mentioned, from the seltzer and hard tea brands. It's likely that they will continue with that, although they need to make sure they do not just lean on that and fall out of the brewer favor, the beer favor. For DG Yingling and Son, as we mentioned, the company does well promoting its products and successes in traditional media, although most of the coverage of that is picked up is local within Pennsylvania and Florida, where its two breweries are. And also, we noted the company is not responsive at all to followers on social media, which is a missed opportunity for it. So our recommendation for Yingling is, again, as you've seen in numerous places here, to avoid public political leanings that have brought some negative effect on its reputation. And it needs to work on a more national strategy now that it is expanding sales outside the Eastern region with its Molson Coors partnership. So for Duvel Mortgat USA, the company does not conduct media outreach for its subsidiaries and allows them to manage their own. Those subsidiaries do have strong Twitter and Instagram presence and are very active and engaging in those. But we recommend that Duvel Mortgat USA should combine efforts of those subsidiaries for media outreach to try to be able to reach a more national audience and create a more national awareness of those brands, as they do get good quality reviews for the products for those who are aware of them. And for Stone Brewing, we mentioned a couple times the company is the best of the four at visual imagery, and has high visibility on social media, but it is not responsive at all to its followers, which is, again, a missed opportunity. The company's leadership are more visible than the others, except for maybe for Boston Beer, but their strong personality doesn't always sit favorably with the media, and that is part of why they sometimes garner more negative coverage. So our recommendation for Stone Brewing is that the company needs to rebuild its reputation as a supporter of fellow craft brewers in the way that Boston Beer has done, as we saw how well that helps the Boston Beer reputation. And Stone Brewing needs to take a page. Hopefully that if the Molson Coors lawsuit gets settled soon, they can turn its attention to trying to foster the smaller brewers rather than attack them with trademark infringement lawsuits. So we hope you got some good insight from this analysis. It will be interesting to see how much longer Yuengling and Boston Beer Company will be able to remain in the craft brewing category as they continue to expand. And if they end up being excluded, it'll be interesting to see what will happen inside the industry when those big brothers are no longer lobbying for the little guys. The next couple of slides detail our definition of tone for our media coverage. I will be available to answer any questions anyone has. Following this, please reach out to me and have a good afternoon.